Hello there, folks, and a very nice Thursday evening to you. I hope you've had a nice week. I feel as if it's been a good few days since I'd last done anything on the channel. I think I want to say it was a video uploaded. No, it was AI slop. That's what it was. So yeah, it's been a little while since I've last spoke to you guys, and it's been even longer, I think, since I've done a stream. I'm joined here by Cameron and Tom, who I will be throwing over to in just a minute. But first of all, what's here on the agenda? Well, I think we need to talk about the Reform Civil War, don't we? Because I was tempted. I was tempted on the day that I first heard about some of this stuff to do a video or a stream on it, but I held off because I thought I really don't know what to make of it. And enough time has passed now that I'm still not entirely sure what to make of it. But at the very least, I've got a more general sense of what's going on, and I'm very interested to hear what people think, because certainly from placing an ear to the reform supporting part of the internet, there are two camps, quite ardent camps here, of pro Rupert Lowe, anti Nigel Farage, and vice versa. So in a nutshell, what I understand is that obviously it was put out that Rupert Lowe had been reported to the police, I think, for a confrontation where allegedly threats of violence were made against the Reform chairman. I've forgotten his name. Zia Yusuf, is that right? Ben Habib? Which one am I thinking of? Who is he? Reform chairman. One of them.
I think it's Zia Yusuf rather than Ben Habib. I think Ben Habib, the chairman, but he was sacked by Farage.
He was the one who got replaced by Zia Yusuf. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
believe.
So the accusation I think that's been put to the police is to do with threats of violence by Rupert Lowe against Zia Yusuf, allegedly. Thrown into the mix is also complaints of bullying in his office, but I think digging further into that, it's not actually accusations of him doing any bullying. It's something a bit more general. So we'll put that one to the side for just a moment. Obviously, this came a day after Rupert Lowe had penned an article in which he was not as loyal to Farage as Farage would like. Let's put it that way. He accused him of being a bit of a messiah, and that they needed to get more serious if they were going to get into government. Generally, stuff that you don't want one of your, they've only got 5 MPs in Parliament, and you've got one of them questioning the leader. So what I'm trying to figure out here, okay, on the one hand, you've got some accusations against Rupert Lowe. On the other hand, you've got Rupert Lowe having quite publicly started to go against Farage just before, at the very least, this police referral was done. Is it the case that the police referral was done in response to Rupert Lowe being disloyal to Nigel Farage, or is it the case that Rupert Lowe got wind of the fact that Farage was going to go public with this and then got in quickly and early by making these comments about Nigel, and then he has the cover to say, aha, I said this about Nigel, and look at the way that he tries to stick me up. What do you guys think?
As far as I understand, before Lowe became public in his criticisms of Farage, he was well aware of what was going on with his allegations and the reports against him.
Now, just to be clear, Cam, which allegations are we talking about? Because are we talking about the Zia Yusuf ones that refer to the police, or are we talking about something else?
I think it's Zia Yusuf and the reports of bullying parliamentary staff.
Okay.
Or the allegations of. But also, I've been reading that Rupert Lowe and Farage has been speaking to him for months. That means talking.
So they have been, just jumping in here, Lee Hallam in the chat. Hello there, Renee, as well. Lee Hallam says, I think it's been coming for a while. Lowe has been semi-detached for a while. Of course, we do also need to mention that back when the blow-up with Nigel Farage and Elon Musk happened, because Elon Musk was not happy with Nigel Farage refusing to bring Tommy Robinson into the fold, Rupert Lowe was a person that Elon had sort of said, I don't think Nigel has what it takes to lead the party. And then I think Elon said of Rupert Lowe something like, I don't really know the guy, but the stuff that he says online makes sense. And some had seen that as a sort of a tacit endorsement of him, maybe.
Yeah, there's been a couple of articles circulating that suggesting Musk is willing to fund a new party led by Rupert Lowe. So that rumour's been going around over the last couple of days.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on that simply because I don't know how much to read into those kinds of rumours at the moment. Let's talk about Rupert Lowe in relation to reform. Then I'd say that Rupert Lowe sits on the right of reform. Is probably fair to say, or at least publicly, he will say things that go a bit further than Farage does. For example, I think supporting mass deportations or remigration, as some of them are now calling it. That's something that Farage hasn't gone for, but I think Rupert Lowe's been in favour of. There may be other things. So this is the thing that I'm trying to get my head around, right? On the one hand, Nigel Farage, every party he ever leads is the Nigel Farage party, and the claims of him being a bit of a messiah figure, I think, are fair. There's a bit of a cult of personality around Farage, not to the extent I'd say of someone like Donald Trump, but nonetheless, I think it exists. The trouble is, I struggle to see a reform type party succeeding without Farage. They only got rocket boosters on them in the run up to the last general election because Farage came back. Is it there? But is it then also fair to say that Farage himself is a limiting factor on reform because of things like I don't know how close he is to Donald Trump, past comments about Vladimir Putin, things like that. Whether there are just enough people that say, I just couldn't vote for it because I don't like Farage or I don't like his associations. It's kind of like, on the one hand, I think Farage is a big pull factor into reform, but I think there's also a ceiling on that party because of Nigel Farage himself also. I suppose the question I'm trying to ask here, and I'll open this up to the two of you, let's say, hypothetically, an Elon Musk-backed Rupert Lowe splinter right-wing party, how would that fare relative to Reform and the Tories, do you think?
It's very hard to answer that question.
I think that I think the problem with this is it creates the idea that people know who Rupert Lowe is, and the vast majority of people in this country simply have no idea who this man is. Like, there was a poll that was done, I think, by JL Partners, that basically asked people to sort of identify who Rupert Lowe was by showing them a picture of who he was. And 86% of people simply had no idea who he was. And I think there was about 8% more people who mistook him for another person. So when you combine that two together, you're talking like, what, 94% of people who can't identify him, and only around 6% of people can, if my maths is correct. So straight off the bat, you've got someone who is incredibly unknown to the actual public. So him setting up his own political party just won't go anywhere because it won't have any name recognition, or people have any idea of who he actually is himself. I mean, if he wanted to do it, I think he would have to play it the long game, in the sense that he would basically have to stay as an independent for the time being and then spend the next year or two building up his profile. And that would be by going on media, mainstream television media like GB News, maybe potentially also ITV, and then graduating up to the more bigger ones like Sky and BBC. He should do that with mainstream media. Then he should also try and go on to like more new media type stuff, so like podcasts and YouTube channels and live politics streamers, essentially just building up his profile so that more and more people know who he is. And if he is successful with that, then come 2027, 2028, he should set up his own party then and see where it goes. But if he was to do it like this year, for example, I think it would just be yet another one of those right-wing parties, splinter groups that ultimately just goes nowhere, like the Heritage Party as one example.
Just say, I think it depends on a certain Elon Musk's backing, and whether these rumors are actually true that Musk is willing to back a Rupert Lowe party. I think that will determine how successful, how much publicity that party will get. I think that's probably the most important factor, whether this could take off.
I think certainly Musk's money would make a great amount of difference there to any splinter party. Musk himself, obviously, we need to remember, is a very mercurial man. He seems to change his mind on things and people often enough, as we saw with Farage, for example. So
it's not just his money; it's his name and recognition and his influence that he has.
Let me take a few comments on this quickly just before I continue on. So where are we? Lee Hallam says Ben Habib was joint deputy leader under Tice and quit to reform. NA says so much stuff has happened since your last stream. Reform stuff, disability cuts by like I hadn't heard of disability cuts. I'd heard what am I trying to say? They were foreshadowing that there might be some changes to benefits, which did have my attention, but I'm not sure if they've done any of that yet, or if they have, I've missed the announcement. But I'd expect that if they were doing any of, I mean, I don't know. That said, I've been away for a few days, but I hadn't heard of them actually announcing any cuts, but possibly that they're looking at that stuff. And also, yeah, NHS England getting scrapped today. What's the crack with? No. We're deviating. Let me stay on topic for a minute. We'll get onto that soon enough. Also says it's now very hard to see who will be Farage's successor when he goes. Lee Hallam says at the root is policy. Lowe and Habib want 1 million deportations, any illegal immigrant, no matter how long they've been here. Lowe wants public sector spending halved also. So sounds in a nutshell that Lowe and Habib seem to be more of the Donald Trump mold in the sense of mass deportations, because obviously that's what he's going for at the moment. And if we're looking at public sector spending being halved, I don't know, see that as a parallel to the Department of Government efficiency with Elon Musk. It seems that they're wanting to go a lot harder and stronger in that kind of policy direction than because Farage, many people have sort of said recently, seems to be trying to appeal more to the centre ground than he has done previously. He's more interested in winning over people who are still saying they'll vote Tory at the moment than he is trying to keep the old heritage, reclaim, UKIPper type people on side instead. He's trying to go more for a middle ground there. What I will say that a few more comments and then I'll say what I was going to say. And A says can't see anyone who has his pull or way with the media within the British right other than him. Claire King says the problem is no one but the online right. No Lowe. Lee Hallam says yes, Tom. Online right wingers and fanatical football fans know who he is. Yeah. Having heard that explanation of it and the fact that no one knows who he is, that's not that's not a good basis for a splinter party to have immediate success. You'd have to have a name recognition rivaling that of Nigel Farage with the general public for a splinter party to have success. So really, this conversation about Lowe versus Farage and what sort of wing of reform ought to win out in their policy direction, it does seem much more to be a more online-centric and reform-centric debate rather than something that's burst out into the public. As far as the public's concerned, maybe they've heard that Nigel Farage has fallen out with one of his MPs. That's maybe the extent to which the average person's heard about this, if at all, I would assume. Last few comments that I'll take here. Farage is one of the most well-known politicians in the country. He probably is more well-known than Starmer, but idiots on X, that's some neophyte who bankrupted Southampton FC, would do a better job because 10 Russian bots on fucking Twitter said so. I'll in a nutshell then, what I'll say is, yeah, obviously Twitter is not real life, as we know. And
I think the point that Frank's making there is basically a lot of the online right-wing people are essentially just getting completely carried away from themselves and think that because Rupert Lowe gets 10,000 likes on Twitter for spewing out some right-wing drivel, that means he's basically going to become Britain's next Prime Minister, and it's rather ludicrous. I mean, at the end of the day, whether the non-Tory right wing want to acknowledge it or not, Farage is the best chance that they have of getting into government. And if Farage goes, then reform will crumble without him. And that's just a fact at the end of the day. I mean, look at what happened to UKIP when Farage left it. The party crumbled. And I know people will say, oh, that happened because of Brexit, but they were going down, down, down even before that happened. So I don't think you can say it's entirely due to Brexit. And when Brexit was on the ropes in like the first half of 2019, UKIP still struggled to gain any kind of popularity. And then you had the Brexit party get taken over by Farage, and it just went up and up and up in support again. So if they want to get into government rather than just being an endless protest movement, Farage is the man that they've got to stick with at the end of the day. But whether they will or not, I just do not know.
I think because I've seen criticism of Farage from the right of Farage online, not specifically Rupert Lowe, but kind of that wing of reform supporters and sort of your online. I don't know if alt-right is the right word, but you know the kinds I'm on about: anti-woke, tacitly Trump supporting, that kind of set of people. They very much do want reform to go harder on things like immigration, for example, or even mass deporting all illegal immigrants. But the public's just not there, really. Reform's doing as well as it is right now. I think partly because Labour and the Tories are in a real downwards spell at the moment. But secondly, because I think Farage has tried to soften off a few of his rougher edges, so to speak, as far as what he's putting out there for people. He's not going the full Trump on some of these issues. And I don't think that the public would follow them if he did. I think you'd end up seeing I mean, what was the previous ceiling on UKIP's support? Was it something like 12 or 13% in a general election and maybe the high teens in opinion polling? Something like that, maybe.
I think yeah, I mean, when Reform was not led by Farage, but it was led by Tice, Reform was polling on average about 10-11%, and then when Farage took over, the party rocketed all the way up to 20% at its high before it then got squeezed a bit and then got put down to 15% come an election.
So I think the Reform Party is largely in effect still the Nigel Farage party, and probably will continue to be for some time at least. And I don't think them moving off in a direction even further to the right than where they presently are is likely to win them any votes. Certainly not any more votes than they're presently getting. So that, I guess, is my 2 cents on the whole question about reform. Now, it's a tricky one because I don't really have a horse in this race. I've been spending the past week trying to figure out, whose side am I on here? Am I on Team Rupert Lowe or Team Nigel Farage? And I'm really not on either. It's more sort of watch the rats fight in the sack kind of thing. I guess Farage is the more electorally viable leader. And given that I don't want reform to get into power, maybe I do want Farage to get replaced. But then again, as Lee Hallam's just said here in the chat, well, Farage can't really be got rid of as leader. Technically, there's a mechanism, but it's not practical. The members joined for Nigel. Yeah, it was, the whole thing was founded by Nigel initially as a company. I know they've recently democratized the party and brought in rules and ways of getting rid of people, but from what I remember reading at the time, it didn't seem like a particularly easy or immediate channel to getting a new leader. So I think ultimately, Rupert Lowe. I'll just say this. I'll just say this quickly. Sorry. I think ultimately of this spat, Rupert Lowe is going to end up on the outside of the tent. I don't think that there's going to be any reconciliation where he ultimately rejoins Reform or chums up with Nigel again. I don't think. However, I think that Reform will be somewhat damaged by this spat. At the very least, I think those to the right of Nigel, who do want a harder line on some of these things, will feel very betrayed on behalf of Rupert Lowe, and they'll. I don't know how many of them would say on principle I won't vote Reform anymore, or whether they'll stick with it. But certainly there's a group of Reform supporters that will be pissed off at Nigel Farage over what's happened recently.
I mean, with the leadership of Reform, you can see that in how Farage got to be leader in the first place. I mean, he basically just waltzed in and declared himself leader, and it was just accepted. There was no real process of democratic accountability or even a democratic vote. It was pretty much just he came in, took over it, and became leader. So
we said at the time, didn't we, that when he replaced Tice, we said it was a bit like what Putin had done in Russia, where he was prime minister for 4 years before going back to the presidency again. I've forgotten the name of the other guy with him. Medvedev? Is that the one?
Dmitry Medvedev.
That's the one.
Yeah,
Yeah. We said it was sort of a comparable scenario to that. You know, put Tice in front for a few years and then go, right, off you go, Tice. I'm leading again now.
Yeah. So getting rid of him, I don't think is really feasible to do unless he gets like pressured to go out, which I don't see him doing anytime soon. In terms of who it's beneficial for, I think it really depends because I've put forward the theory that if reform crumbles at any point, then I think that that will actually be very good news for one man in particular, and that man is Robert Jenrick, who I think, if reform did crumble electorally and in polling, I think that Robert Jenrick would go for Tory leader, and I think that he could potentially absorb a huge amount of reform voters on his culture war and anti-migration stance. Because if you look at his Twitter, a lot of it is pretty much just full-blown culture war, anti-migration stuff that isn't that far removed from a lot of what reform talks about. I mean, he unironically uses the phrase two-tier care over and over and over again on his Twitter account. So it's clear.
Sorry, go on.
It's clear that he's definitely trying to position himself in such a way that he can absorb any reform fallout if it does occur and use that to benefit his career and his leadership chances and potentially prime ministerial ambitions as well.
I think, yeah, I'd noticed with Jenrick, there was definitely a shift in Jenrick over the last few years, that he seems to go from a relatively sort of unknown minister on my radar, at least. Didn't seem like there was much especially different to him, to suddenly turning into, you know, immigrants and woke and all, you know, went very, very, very hard on that sort of stuff. Quite quick. I would say, by the way, that I think that if and when we do end up in a situation where Badnoch's getting replaced, I think you've got Jenrick as the candidate of the right and probably Cleverly as a more middle of the road kind of guy, and those are the two that I think are most in contention to replace Badnoch, assuming she goes. I want to read a few comments real quick, Tom. Because Joey's asked me something here. Swiss, is there any potential truth in something I've been suspecting without any evidence? Since Elon failed to, quote, take over in terms of piling in money to influence policy, and then he made comments about how Farage is not the man, since then he has had people trying to overthrow him. Seems fishy, and they are the Elon type. Okay, so what Joey's asking is, since the row between Elon Musk and Nigel Farage broke out over the issue of Tommy Robinson, he says that it seems that there are more people out to get Farage now. Is there anything to that? Is it Elon pulling the strings, maybe, or what have you? My take on it, Joey, and Cameron and Tom, you're more than welcome to weigh in on this as well. My take is that I have very much noticed over the last few months that there is a wing. I'm calling it the right wing of reform, but it may not even be within reform. You could say it's to the right of reform also. But there's certainly a portion of sort of very hard right to extreme right politics that sees Nigel Farage at this point as a bit of a sellout. He's gone a bit soft. He's not willing to say all the brave, bold, based things that they come to expect of him. And they think that he's not the guy anymore. He's been captured by the establishment. You need someone who's someone like Rupert Lowe, or more of the ilk of a Donald Trump type, someone further to the right than what they're getting at the moment. Now, first of all, Joey, I don't know. I can't sit here with any certainty and say that there isn't some kind of a coordinated effort going on that also involves supporters of Elon Musk or people in Elon Musk's circle. I can't say that. But at the same time, it's also quite conceivable to me that simply people with their own sets of opinions on things have looked at what's going on with reform and especially with the division over Tommy Robinson, for example, there's probably a chunk of people that quite would like Tommy Robinson to be involved in the party as opposed to the lot that don't. But they've made up their own minds at this point that they're now against Farage. And I think it's that particular slice of the more extreme right that also happens to get a nice big megaphone handed to them on Elon Musk's X, because that's what he's been doing with all of them lately, that you're hearing more and more from, and you're probably seeing them more prominently and hearing from them more prominently. I don't know if we're just talking about that platform. Maybe you're talking about people saying stuff on Facebook or YouTube or whatever else. So, Joey, I can't say that Elon Musk's behind it all. I've not seen any evidence that Elon Musk's behind it all. However, Elon Musk obviously has influence with these people. So what he says and what opinion he states will affect other people. But for the time being, at least, my 2 cents is just to say that I think you're seeing a pushback against Farage from people to the right of Farage because they think he's gone soft and they want somebody else. That's my 2 cents on it for the time being. Have you guys got anything else you want to add to that?
I think that a lot of it is really just an indication that a substantial chunk of the right wing globally is basically severely radicalizing itself into more and more extreme views. And I think that's more what the backlash against Farage is. It's not really a sense of interference from Musk, although he might play a role, he might not play a role. I think it is just further evidence that a lot of the right wing globally is just radicalizing itself more and more into the more extreme beliefs over time.
I think that is also a factor, that maybe you have more people drifting further in that direction also. But it's anyway. I hope that answers your question, Joey, as far as what we think about it. Will Slater is here in the chat and says, "Hey guys, don't know if you remember me from many years ago. The name rings a bell. Will Slater, the name rings a bell. I'm checking back in.
Oh, I remember who he is.
You remember
Yeah.
Will?
Yeah, I do remember who he is. He was a person from the chat many years ago, as in pre-COVID time, who lived in Spain, and I think he still lives in Spain, who used to comment on Spanish and UK politics as well. But yeah, I do remember who he is, yes.
Well, there we are. Tom's got a better memory than me. Will says, I'm checking back in. Nigel Farage, like Nicola Sturgeon, is the example of a party only being as good as their leader. And also adds, I'm still a Spanish resident, and Musk has tried to stick his oar in here, as with the rest of the European right. With Spain, it's not working. I mean, where is it working? There's a question for you. Where is it working? Where has it had any effect? Germany, maybe? I don't know.
United States.
Yeah, okay. United States is a given. United States is a given. Because I mean, you remember at the beginning of the year, I was very, very concerned by Elon Musk getting involved in our politics, because it was something we hadn't really seen to that degree before, and I was yet to get a good footing with figuring out what kind of effect it was going to have, how long it was going to be ongoing for, all that sort of stuff. But it seems actually broadly, besides his interventions over the grooming scandal and all the outrageous things he had to say about some of our politicians, I mean, I don't know. I don't really look at Elon Musk's tweets anymore, but has he largely left the UK alone since then? Or has it at least broadened his interests in other countries? Because the main one I can think of usually is the AfD in Germany. He's got a real hard-on for them.
The main one that he's been talking about at the moment is Romania, because the right-wing conspiracy theorist, very pro-Russia candidate of Georgescu, I don't know what his first name is, but I know what his surname is, was banned by the Romanian Constitutional Court for running for president of Romania, because he was essentially taking a lot of money directly from the Russian Federation, and so he was banned on those grounds for electoral interference. And Musk and a lot of the online right have basically used that as proof that the European Union is the EU SSR trying to crush democracy in Europe. That's essentially what his main focus is at the moment.
I think we'd had a debate in the group chat with a friend who was making this point, and I'd sort of said in response to that, well, the thing is, it's not as if the populist right and the far right haven't been able to win elections in all sorts of other European countries. So I don't whatever's going on in Romania, I don't take it as a top-down EU getting involved in their election, saying no, you can't have that far right candidate. At least whatever's going on, it seems to be Romania, you know. Let me take a few more of these comments here. There was something I heard about though. There was something, I don't know if it was like a TikTok video or I need to look into this again. I'd read something about the Romanian thing that there was something that was claimed that either the candidate who got banned or his party had done, but then it actually turned out that particular thing hadn't had anything to do with them. But then what does still stand, you're saying, is these charges of accepting Russian money.
TikTok is also kind of linked to this in a way because he, the Georgescu guy, hired a bunch of people, paid them directly on TikTok, people who weren't political influencers in Romania but were quite popular TikTokers in Romania to essentially endorse him for president. And he did all this while he also said at the same time that his presidential campaign cost him zero, whatever the Romanian currency is.
I see.
Which seems a bit odd.
Well, I'll steer myself away from this one because I'm not as knowledgeable about the Romanian election as I'm about other things we're chatting about today. I'll take a few more comments that we've got here in the chat. So NA says, if Truss hadn't crashed the economy, likely destroying any political future for her. Hey, what are you talking about? Truss is having a brilliant political future. She's more popular now than she's ever been, if you're American. Then I could see her wanting to be the future leader of reform. Yeah, no better way to fucking kill reform than put Truss in charge. I'd love to see that. Go on, Truss.
That
would
be the definitive end of reform completely. If she became leader of reform, that's reform polling at about 2% maximum.
Truss, go on. Nigel's gone soft. He's lunching with the tofu eating Wokarati. You need Truss. Truss with yeah. Go on.
I do foresee a number of Tories joining reform after local elections.
I could see that. Yeah, I could see that.
I mean, so Bourbon. There's rumours about her. I mean, it wasn't surprised if Truss joined reform whatsoever.
I actually think that they would block her from joining simply because she's such a loathed and toxic figure that her joining reform would just be completely politically radioactive for them.
That'll be Elon Musk's spat number 2, pressuring Farage into letting Truss join. He goes, no, Farage, you said no to Tommy Robinson, but you're having Truss. I don't have faith in you as leader anymore. You don't have this Truss in your party.
And then Truss starts supporting Rupert Lowe.
Oh, God.
What happened to Rupert Lowe is the same thing that happened to me when I was Prime Minister. The establishment got together and blah, whatever. What else do we have here in the chat? I doubt any demographic so far to the right that they won't vote reform is that large, given how high reform are polling. Maybe around 5% are too far right. They won't vote reform, I'd guess. I'd take the point that you make there, NA. That whatever political grouping out there exists to the right of reform, they're not an awfully numerous bunch.
I think like with a lot of the Corbynites, they'll actually vote. A lot of Corbynites complaining about Star, but at the end voted Labour. A lot of them will end up voting Reform. That's what I think.
Did a lot of Corbynites vote for Labour though? Like I got the impression that a lot of them voted for the Green Party.
Yeah, and many of them did, but I think a lot of them, from my observation, did end up voting Labour just because they don't want the Tories out. That's what I saw happening. At least the Corbynites I know locally did that.
I've got a question for you guys. We've got one here from Ignis N. Thrallus, who says, "Do even the UK rightoids like Musk?" I mean, Nigel
Generally speaking,
Farage allegedly does, because Elon Musk is a hero, according to Nige. But yeah, what does the right think of Musk? Because I think my guess would be they probably like some of the things that he says, and they like some of the policies that he stands for. And obviously, he is going to have a following to a degree, as some of them are going to be like Musk fanboys. But I imagine the more level-headed people are going to be like, nah, maybe he's on our side, but he's still a bit cringe and isn't necessarily reliable. I don't know. What do you think?
I think the only people I've ever seen who like Musk are basically the extremists who occupy Twitter. And outside of that, I would say that the reception to Musk is either negative or indifferent. The main thing I've heard from a lot of people on the right who don't like Musk is they basically view him as cringe. That's the sort of main view that they have of him. They just view him as a very
Well,
cringe-worthy person.
well, he is. This is a much wider point in a way. But it was the CPAC conference, the one where Musk went on stage with the chainsaw, right? I looked at that and I just kind of went, cringe, yuck, moving on, you know. Surely
Yeah, that's basically the
online,
attitude that the right wing has in this
yeah.
country to
I mean,
him.
wasn't it not too long ago that the online right, they hated those woke SJWs crying with their rainbow flag tears at Donald Trump, and what they wanted was based people and Pepe the Frogs and people who are willing to say the thing that no one else wanted to say, and it was this idea that their side was, it was cool, it was based, it was anti-establishment, and then Musk is sort of ruining that for them with his cringe,
Yeah, that's the
see it,
general approach I get to him. The other thing also that a lot of them don't like is because the UK right wing tends to be quite interventionist and hawkish when it comes to foreign policy. They don't like Musk being like Z and pro-Russia. So that's another reason why they're not particularly fond of him. Like his constant berating of Zelensky in Ukraine doesn't go down well with a lot of right wingers here.
That is another thing I was going to come on to more broadly, because we've been talking about reform here. The past few weeks, with obviously Trump, Ukraine, Zelensky, all of that being at the forefront of the news, I think Farage has found himself in a tricky position with some of this stuff, and I think he's found himself falling on the wrong side of a few issues that have cropped up as far as what wider public opinion goes. And usually he's quite adept at navigating these things, but he's basically painted himself into a corner between the spread of British public opinion, which seems to be pretty darn pro Ukraine, generally pretty anti-Trump, definitely very anti-Putin, and then you've got Farage still trying to sort of play nicey nice with whatever it is that Trump's doing. It's kind of going, oh yeah, Zelensky should have worn a suit, It's like, you're not going to have any bad words to say about your mate Donald, though, are you? So I don't know. I've been waiting. I'll say this quickly. I'll say this quickly. Sorry, I've been waiting to see if there's any change in the polls over the past few weeks. Namely, I've been looking for it in response to Ukraine, and now, secondly, I'm looking for it as far as this reform spats goes, whether there's been any shift there. From what I have seen in the last few weeks, it does appear that reform's rise in the polls has finally tapered off. It's leveled off. They don't seem to be rising on average anymore. The poll of polls I've seen on Wikipedia actually has them dipping just a tiny little bit. So at the very least, we'll say that they seem to be holding steady compared to the rise they were on a few weeks ago.
There was a poll today that put reform at 27%.
I saw that one, but that was Find Out Now, which I think is the pollster that has reform the highest generally. And it was 1 point up for reform, 1 point down for Labour, which is any poll that has 1 point of movement, I consider as being noise, basically, because it can go either way within any sort of poll. 1 point, one way or the other.
Well, the example I was thinking of with the whole anti-Ukraine thing was basically after Trump berated Zelensky in that meeting a couple of weeks ago, you had basically every single right-wing politician here openly just condemn Trump for it and be like, why are you attacking Zelensky? And a lot of this criticism is ridiculous.
Sorry, Tom, can I jump in quickly? Because I'll say, as far as the right-wing politicians here, I don't think they necessarily directly attacked Trump over it, but what they did do was make no bones about the fact that they stood with Zelensky in Ukraine. That was sort of the what am I trying to say? That was the way that they went about it. It wasn't necessarily that I think your Kemi Badnox or anyone like that was saying what Donald Trump has done is disgusting. Rather, it was just issuing statements of "we support Ukraine," and then the quiet part.
Well,
that
there was
Tom says
also
is,
elements of it that said things like Trump is wrong in what he says here about Ukraine.
Oh, okay.
Is what they were basically saying. It wasn't like a condemnation of him, but it was like a sort of, no, you're not correct about that type of thing. I
Yeah.
also don't think as well that Trump's constant attacking of supposed allied nations of the US, whilst having a very soft touch approach in comparison to supposed enemies of the US, has also gone down well here either, with a lot of right wingers, especially with his constant really hawkish attitudes towards Canada, where he's much more aggressive and hardline against Canada than he is against Russia or Iran or North Korea or China, as examples.
I'm throwing this out here, okay, that I can't read the mind of Donald Trump, and there's no sense in me sitting here and saying I think he's going to do X or Y in regards to Canada and Greenland. But I will say that I remain concerned about it. I can't comfortably just write those things off as, oh, it's just Trump saying the things he says and it's all part of a negotiating position. I take that argument, and in many cases that argument does apply to the things that he does. But Trump has surprised me in a lot of ways in the last few months. So I can't comfortably say I don't think anything will happen there. I don't know.
From my perspective, it seems that his approach to Canada is very, very similar to China's approach to Taiwan. Much of the rhetoric that he says towards Canada is very similar to what China says regarding Taiwan, where he says things like Canada should be the 51st state and Canada's destiny lies by being a part of the US, is very similar to China's rhetoric of Taiwan is a province of China, has always been a province of China, and always will be a province of China, and reunification is inevitable. And the other thing that also makes it quite similar as well is neither Trump nor Xi Jinping ever rule out the use of military force in order to achieve reunification with Taiwan or annexation of Canada. So that's what I would often compare it to. The attitude Trump has to Canada is very similar to the Chinese attitude towards Taiwan.
What I want to do quickly, guys, just before I go on any further, because I'm going to take a few more comments we got in the chat. I just want to share the Wikipedia polar polls here, just to show you guys what I've been seeing recently. So the most recent polls that we got from February and March, mixed bag between Reform leads and Labour leads. But our lovely moving average graph polar polls here, you can actually see Reform's highest point on average actually probably fell a couple of weeks ago. As far as the averages of all these polls goes, Labour's now slightly out in front, Reform's down, Tories still in a relatively distant third. Lib Dems have had a nice little bump for themselves. So I just wanted to share that to illustrate what I was saying a moment ago about Reform's support. They're still very much up there with Labour, to and fro. One pollster says one's in front, another pollster says the other's in front, but they are now lower than their peak. They've stopped rising for the time being. Let me take a few more of these comments. I'm aware, by the way, that we've been going for about 45 minutes. I'm going to try not to go too much longer than an hour. We'll see. So let me just do a few of these quick. Joey says, I'm a bit behind, but that makes sense, Swiss. Rather than Elon himself, it's more like-minded Eloners or more right-wing types trying to hijack. Yeah, in a nutshell. Lee Hannum says, Ukraine has damaged Trump with a lot of the right-wing public here, though views on him are mixed. So far, Labour are up 1 or 2 and Reform are down 1 or 2. There have been developments on Ukraine today. The pressure might be going on Russia now. We shall see. God, so much to talk about. Obviously, there had been a meeting between Ukrainian negotiators and Americans in Saudi Arabia recently, and I think from there, I think the mineral deal was agreed, and they'd also come out talking about a 30-day ceasefire. Ukraine had gone into it talking about a ceasefire just in the air and the sea or something, but then they came out of it saying no, a ceasefire across the board. Marco Rubio then said, okay, Russia, the ball's in your court now. Ukraine has said they want a ceasefire. What about you? And this is arguably the first time since Trump's intervention in the war that we're seeing what appears to amount to some kind of pressure on the Russians, because it now is being thrown to them to say, right, well, ceasefire proposal. What are you going to do? All the way through, you've been saying Ukraine's the one just blocking peace. We've now got one on the table. What are you going to do about it, Russia?
Well, Russia's response has basically been, we reject the ceasefire because it will just give Ukraine a time to rearm and reorganize themselves. And that isn't peace, basically. And Trump's response to that has been, well, nothing really.
Yeah, I'm very much on this right now. I'm just in a sit and watch kind of position. I don't really have much analysis or any predictions to offer about any of that, because I'm still trying to get my head around what exactly the position of Donald Trump is in relation to all this. So we're just gonna have to see. We'll have to see what comes any further of that. Lee Hallam says Canada stood up to him. That just goads him. Mexico kept quiet and he's forgotten about them. I think we got hit. Didn't he put 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium globally recently?
Yeah, it was a global tariff on steel and aluminium. Yeah. Doesn't really matter for us because we don't have a steel industry anymore, nor an aluminium industry, so it doesn't really matter that much to us. So it's not really something to be concerned with. Not for the moment, anyway. Because if it goes on to other things, it'll be a concern. But as of now, it doesn't really seem to be much of an issue for us. And that's what the government's response has basically been. The government's response has collectively been shrug their shoulders and just move on as if nothing happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not going to be helpful for us, but you are right in saying that those industries of ours are very small anyway. We don't. I mean, I don't think we've got an especially strong trading relationship with America on like steel and stuff. I think we probably make up a tiny little fraction of what it is that they're getting. And yeah, the rest of the world's being hit by it as well.
I mean, it could be worse. We could be in a situation where we're like Canada or the EU at the moment, where they're just getting hit with massive tariffs across the board on everything. I think recently today he said he's going to put 200% tariffs on alcohol. That's his new tariff that he's doing for the EU.
200%.
Specifically
for certain alcoholic products, I think it was
whiskey and champagne in particular. Which is good. It's good news. Yes. Good news for the Scots, actually. Taking out the Irish whiskey.
I guess then probably what Starmer's doing at the moment seems like the right thing. There's a bit of me that goes, "Oh, come on, do something." But if his MO is basically try and keep the target off of our backs for as long as humanly possible, if he's got his hands full right now with Canada and the EU, probably him ignoring us specifically is quite good.
Thank you, Brexit.
Thank you, Canada. Thank you, Mark Carney and Justin Trudeau, for taking all the heat.
Well, mainly Doug Ford as well. He's Doug Ford in Ontario, who's the governor of that place, has particularly taken a very hardline approach towards Trump, more so than even Trudeau or Carney.
It's proving very popular though. They're getting a real sort of rally around the flag effect, aren't they? With all the Trump tariffs that he's throwing their way.
Oh yeah, they are. The Liberals have gone from going to losing their position as a national party to now potentially even winning a majority in the election, which is just mind-boggling to consider what that was like even 2 months ago.
Right, I should probably ask this. Now, I've not had a chance to look into this yet because I've been at work for the day. What's the crack with NHS England and the apparent scrapping of it? Because I know that they had NHS reforms in the pipeline. Do you know any details about this? What changes they're actually seeking to make with it?
I think they basically just want to reverse what was done with the 2012 Health and Social Care Act, where they want to get rid of NHS England and centralise it a lot more to create just like NHS UK or something like that.
I'll tell you what. Rather than just fishing for people to tell me, I'll read a little bit of this article so we can have a look at it together then. NHS England will be abolished and brought under democratic control in an attempt to cut bureaucracy and duplication, Sir Keir Starmer has announced. The organisation, which oversees the country's health service, will be brought into the Department of Health. And the PM said the move would free up money for frontline. So, okay, so it would no longer be NHS England, its own body. It's literally going to be much more directly controlled by the government department, I suppose. The government said it expected around 50% of the jobs at NHS England, which as of December had 14,000 staff, and the Department of Health, which has 3,500 to go. Okay, so that's what NA was referencing earlier on when they said about job cuts. So with this scrapping of NHS England and it being brought in-house, they think okay. So to the tune of maybe 10,000 jobs in total could end up going. Now, when we talk about these jobs, are we talking about doctors and nurses, or are we talking about managers and stuff?
It's management. Even if he said management and the bureaucracy.
Yeah, he basically, in his speech today, he explicitly ruled out nurses and doctors being cut, and instead said that the jobs will be exclusively focused on management and bureaucracy. Essentially, that's what he said.
I see. Well, I mean, from obviously, I'm not really privy to much of the detail of this at the moment, but on the face of it, what I'm hearing, I'm not necessarily against what I'm hearing. When I've thought before about when people say, "Oh, you know, what could be cut from the NHS in order to save money without actually affecting frontline services," one of the first little ideas that pings in my mind is, well, what about all the management roles? Maybe scrap some of them and streamline it a bit. So, if that's part of what's going to be involved here, that would be a positive. What I don't know about and what I can't really speak on at the moment is the difference between having it ran by the Department of Health rather than NHS England. Whether that will ultimately be a better or worse outcome for the service or not, I really don't have an opinion on that so far. Lee Howard in the chat says that's how it was run before 2012.
Well, yeah, that's how it was run before the 2012 Health and Social Care Act, where it got carved up into different region issues. I think I kind of have mixed feelings on it, because on the one hand, I do think it's a good thing that a lot of bureaucracy and management is being cut, because that is one of the core criticisms of the NHS, which I do think is quite valid. But at the same time, the people who are in charge of this are Wes Streeting and Keir Starmer, and I'm not exactly particularly trusting of those two when it comes to things like this.
Okay. Have you got any thoughts on it at the moment, Cameron?
I don't trust them. What exactly they're going to do with the NHS? The idea, if you're going to go after the management and the bureaucracy, which there's far too much of it in the NHS, it's not necessarily a bad thing, even though there might be job losses. The only issue is what exactly are they going to do with the NHS?
But yeah. There's a couple of takes here. Just trying to get a read on what opinion of it from other people are. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch welcomed the move to bring the management of the health service back under ministerial control, but warned that Labour cannot hide if things go wrong. Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey also backed the plans, but argued they were not the main issue for the NHS. So in a nutshell then, if you've got Kemi Badenoch, leader of the opposition Tories, and Ed Davey, both of which saying, yes, we support the idea of bringing this back in-house again, so to speak, even if they've got their own additional bits of, but Labour might fuck it up, but you're not fixing that, whatever. By and large, this as a move then seems to have a degree of political consensus to it. If Labour's pushing it and the Tories and the Lib Dems are agreeing as well, it seems by and large they seem to be on the same page about scrapping NHS England and bringing it back under the Department of Health. That's my read on it. Of course, as I'm saying, I don't know whether it will ultimately prove or not to be a good thing. Depends on what the results are. But it doesn't strike me as madly controversial as I'd first been led to think it was when I'd first heard about it before I'd looked into it. It seems reasonable. It seems like a move that it's understandable to make. Okay, guys, I am going to aim to try and close this off at about the hour mark or so. Grave Peril said, if Westminster is the UK government, why is the English NHS not devolved? Well, partly because we don't have our own devolved parliament. So it would be tricky to have a devolved... Because I know that, like, the NHS in Wales is an issue that is the responsibility of the government in Wales. But obviously, we don't have a government in England. We've got a UK government. It's a weird quirk of our devolution process, isn't it? That all the other parts of the UK have a government except for England. So that would be my assumption. Yeah,
we have a very weird quasi-federalism in the country where basically the English Parliament is the UK government, but the Scottish and the Welsh and the Northern Irish get their own devolved assemblies. So NHS England is more or less run by the UK government, but it's set up by a quango that does it until now.
I think the only way that you could devolve NHS England to England is to devolve, to have a devolved government of England as well, really. Otherwise, I couldn't really see it.
But we have English votes for English laws, so we don't... That's the official compromise.
I'm not reopening the devolution can of worms at the very end of this stream.
Oh, no, we won't. I'm just saying that was the compromise that was created after the 2015 election, where basically only English MPs could vote on laws that specifically affected England, and that was the compromise for not having a devolved assembly in England.
Lee Hallam says English votes for English laws were scrapped a few years ago.
Was it?
That's what Lee said.
I did not know it was. I thought that was still on the books. I
didn't realise that it was like a thing in the first place. I just thought it was a bit of rhetoric. Because I'm sure years back I have remembered at times the SNP saying, "Oh no, we're not voting on this particular thing in Parliament because it's a England-related issue." But then I've also seen at times them making the argument of going, "Well, this thing that they're saying is an England-only issue actually isn't, because whatever funding's being given to these things in England also probably affects the Barnett formula of the funding that we get." So then they justify that they should vote for it. But I've not been awfully... I mean, I'm reaching quite a few years back to remember what I've heard about any of this. So I don't know.
So yeah, I'm reading it now. Boris Johnson actually abolished English votes for English laws.
Oh.
Of course he did.
Thanks, Boris.
Well, we've learned something new today at the end of our stream. All right then. I want to say thank you very much to Tom Williams and Cameron Hickman for joining me, and to all of you guys in the chat. Apologies if I've not had a chance to read your comments out. In a nutshell, from today, then, we are keeping an eye on goings on in reform. And to see whether it affects their polling very much or not. I don't think we're going to see a big decline or slide for reform, but I think that they have... I think their peak for the time being was a few weeks ago. And I think they're unlikely to see a significant boost again until maybe after the local elections. NHS England being brought into the Department of Health. Something that I tacitly support from what I've heard of it so far, but I'm very much yet to see what the results of it end up being. And of course, we continue keeping our eyes on Russia, Ukraine, and Donald Trump just to see what exactly is happening there as well. Any final comments before we go, guys? Oh, there's a by-election coming. Oh, it was that Labour MP who punched someone. Shit. Well, we need to have a quick look at that before we go.
Yeah, by-election in Runcorn, I think it is.
Runcorn by-election. Okay.
Because basically the MP there punched a constituent, got a suspended sentence for it, and then eventually quit, and so now there's by-election there. We don't know what the date of it is, but I strongly suspect it will go alongside the local elections, because that's what usually happens when by-elections are triggered in the first half of any given year.
Yeah, that makes good sense that it would fall on the same day as the locals. Did you see the footage? Because I only saw this the other week. The footage of him actually punching the person. That was
Yeah, I saw it.
that was pretty unambiguous, shall we say? I mean,
yeah,
Christ.
it was.
Yeah. No, absolutely right that he's gone. I think there's no place in Parliament for people who are behaving that kind of a way. To be honest with you, I'm trying to think back to when this all kicked off. Were Labour quite quick in suspending him? I hope they were.
I think
don't
they
know,
were, yeah. I think he was suspended in the same day it was happened.
Okay. Yes, NA. I'm on the Wikipedia page for the Runcorn by-election at the moment. But obviously the Wikipedia page doesn't have a date for us on it yet. I suppose there's little else to say about this right now, other than I think Reform are considered to be the front runners, but it's not seen as a dead cert that they'll win. It could still be a Labour hold. We're not quite sure. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. At the moment, it's Labour, Reform are the favourites, but it's very, very close. Polling apparently shows that there's 1,000 votes in it either way between Labour and Reform.
Wow. Okay then. Well, I mean, this probably then will be. Well, actually, here's me saying this will be the determining factor rather than the locals. But if it's likely to fall on the same day as the locals, it'll all come at the same time anyway. All right then. Well, we will watch and see what happens with that by-election. I'll read the last few comments from you guys. Lee Hallam says of the former MP, what he was saying as he did it didn't match what he was doing. Frank says Peter Ford of the Workers' Party is the first confirmed candidate in Runcorn. Labour are selecting their candidate tonight, according to Michael Crick. Reform are 4-9 odds, according to NA. And Lee Hallam has said John Ashworth says it won't be him. Damn it! I feel like I'm not the only one here saying we need John Ashworth back. We've been inconsolable. We've been beside ourselves ever since we lost John Ashworth in Parliament. It's not the same seeing him on every daytime TV talk show or interview or Newsnight or any of the rest of it. We need him in Parliament. We need more John Ashworth. Don't you agree, guys? Yeah, more John Ashworth. Yeah, whoa, more John Ashworth. I
would be so overjoyed to see him in Parliament.
I was about to say you wouldn't even go along with it with me.
Yeah, I'd be very overjoyed to see him in Parliament. Couldn't wait to see him.
Oh, we need more big beasts back in Parliament. Okay, guys, thank you very much for joining me as always. Drop the stream a like if you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you all again soon. Ta-ta.
Goodbye, people.
Goodbye.